Hey, how's it going, everyone? And welcome back to the FilmSpeak channel for another WandaVision Friday. And this is going to be the last WandaVision Friday ever, because this is a limited series. So this is all we got. This is the last time we're going to be talking about WandaVision on the channel. But hey, if this is your first time checking out the FilmSpeak channel, my name is Griffin. I'm an LA-based entertainment journalist and film critic. And we like to say here on the channel that this is the place where the conversation continues after the credits. And of course, we'd love to have you be a part of that conversation. So consider subscribing to the channel for more TV recaps such as this. We're getting into the Falcon and Winter Soldier here in a couple weeks. Video essays, movie reviews, interviews, and all that great stuff. But today we are going to be focusing on WandaVision episode 9, or the WandaVision series finale. Did it, wrap up everything well? Did it deliver on, the rest of what was a pretty solid season of storytelling thus far? We're going to get into it and we're going to talk about it here, but I am not doing this alone. I'm, of course, joined by the great Elliott from Movie Files. How's it going, man?
It's going good, man. I'm so excited to talk about, that scene with Mephisto and Nightmare. And, we had Agatha going against, Iron Man. I didn't know Iron Man was going to be in the show, and Spider-Man comes swooping through. I mean, it was crazy, man. I didn't expect all the X-Men. I mean, come on, Griff. This was like the greatest episode of television ever.
My favorite part was when Magneto came in, sacrificed himself, and then looked at Wanda and said, "I love you 3000." So we were getting all kinds of crossovers here.
Pulling out the heartstrings, man.
Yeah, it was really super emotional. But no, basically, we knew this from the get-go. We knew that a lot of our fan theories were going to be thrown out the window, and I don't know about you, but I was in favor of that, because I'm like, the less that I can predict on my own, the better. Mm-hmm. And part of the fun of watching a show like this is just like indulging your wildest like imagination, your fantasies and whatnot, and seeing like what could possibly happen. And to be fair, from theorizing and stuff like that, we did predict Agatha Harkness. Some people predicted White Vision, and there were a couple of other things that sort of came to fruition. But the big ones like Mephisto, Nightmare, and all that, I mean, I think it became pretty apparent that was not going to be the case going forward, and I was okay with that. I don't know how you felt, but
yeah, it's a much deeper conversation, and everyone has their own kind of level of threshold with their expectations, fan theories, and getting into all that circle. But, I've been a big comic book fan half my life, so I've already kind of know how to temper my expectations and understand that if the show doesn't give me what I was hoping it would, that I can just take it for what it is. And that's a much bigger conversation to have at a later date. But, it's fun, man. This is the beauty of the MCU. This is what makes it so strong, that people are continuously get excited about dissecting posters and trailers, and we hear the interviews we dissect what the celebrities say or the actors say behind the scenes. So it's fun, man. It's just a matter of everyone obviously takes a lot of that stuff to heart, and if it doesn't come to fruition, then it's the worst thing in the world. So
yeah, I want to say that I saw a tweet earlier that was like, I feel really bad for Matt Shackman, because the actors sort of like went off on their own and were like hyping up different things, and I think you could tell in like interviews that happened later that he was like, "Oh shit, man! Like, what's gonna?" Like,
isn't that so crazy, Griff? Though, like this franchise has been around since 2008. How many press junkets, how many, in the last year, Zoom calls? I'm so baffled that Paul Bettany, Elizabeth Olsen, Tiana Paris hasn't been, I don't want to say coached up or trained, but they haven't been like, mindset of this, like, keep things at bay. You don't have to feel like, I feel like they're pressured to say things. Like, they're pressured to say, yeah, there's a Luke Skywalker reveal. Yeah, there's a big cameo. And I don't know why to be fair, they have to sell a show. I get all that aspect, but there is a little bit of, I don't want to say blame, but it just baffles me that these actors, these trained actors, are just like blowing smoke on headlines. It's just really weird to see.
On one hand, I appreciate the trolling, because I think it's really funny, because it just totally just, it's fun to mess with people who are like trying to, leak stuff out, predict the future of this and all that stuff. But at the same time, for everyone else, you do sort of set a precedent, not a precedent, but you sort of like set up expectations that if they're not going to be met, you are going to disappoint some people. Now, I mean, I think some of us could after a little bit, we could tell, oh yeah, they're messing around. They're just trying, they're playing into like the internet, theorizing about everything. And like I said, one hand, I like that. But on the other hand, I get it, because it is something that like, you are expecting something. You are expecting that big reveal at the end or whatever, because the people who are involved with the show are telling you that you should expect that. So, I don't know. It's a little weird. But like, listen, theories aside, let's get into this episode. Before we go any further, though, guys, be sure to jump down in the chat if you're watching us live. I see a lot of you are. Keep putting your thoughts in there. Well, I'm definitely reading them, and hopefully we'll get to some of them.
We'll definitely get to that boner talk a little bit later.
I do want to get to the boner talk. And then if you're watching this on the replay, go ahead and jump down to the comment section and let us know what your thoughts are on the WandaVision finale. Were you satisfied? Did you like it? Did you hate it? And then what did you think of the series as a whole now, looking back at everything we got? So, Elliott, let's start with you. Did you like the finale? And how do you think, I guess, we'll start with, did you like the finale? And then do you think that the series as a whole ultimately delivered?
I like the finale. There are moments that I really loved, I'll be honest, and we'll dive into it with, the character payoff, the emotional payoff, things of that nature. But I'm not going to lie, there were some moments that I felt like, this was an MCU fight CGI fest that just kind of didn't feel necessary, kind of felt forced. It didn't feel like it was part of the narrative we've been seeing in the last 6 hours of the show. I feel like it was an MCU checkbox in regards to, okay, we got the character moments. We're developing Wanda and Vision and her grief and how she handles that. But we got to throw in some action. We got to keep the people satisfied. And it just felt so kind of forced to me because it wasn't anything we've seen in the show before in regards to action. Of course, we were kind of expecting that, but you don't have to do it just because you have to do it. You can kind of keep going with the narrative you're telling there. So we'll dive into that a little bit later, but that was the weakest aspect to me. The action just felt so forced. But in regards to the things I did enjoy, it's the character payoff. It's the emotions. Again, this show, we have all of our theories, Mephisto, Doctor Strange, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, this is a human story. This is a character in Wanda Maximoff who has, since a little girl, has suffered loss after loss after loss. And we're seeing not just a regular human being, but a Scarlet Witch, how she deals with that. Even Monica has a moment in this episode where she says, if I was in your position, if the shoe was on the other foot, I would have done the same thing you have done. So I think there's that thread line, there's that through line that really kind of stuck the landing. She finally has to face her trauma, says goodbye to the Hex. We talk about the comic books, where it comes from. No more mutants. Well, she had to say no more Hex in this episode. And I think that's what I take away from this series is we see a character going through something that we can all relate to as human beings, which is grief.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said that the stuff that worked, as was throughout the entirety of the show, was the character drama. The stuff that didn't work was when the MCU tried to, the larger MCU tried to overtake what was going on, and then it sort of like divulged into, laser blasting and shooting and action climax and stuff like that. Yeah. That I have a lot of major issues with the action and how it was handled in this episode because it was awful. In terms of the character stuff, like you were saying, excellent. I really liked the final moments we got between Wanda and her family and Vision and her having to say goodbye, and then we get the tears from Vision, which was so beautiful. And then learning that like he was the piece of the Mind Stone that lived within her, like that was such a beautiful like connection to the two of them. Him having the Mind Stone and then her having a piece of it within her. He lives inside of her. That was so beautiful. And then the other stuff that I really found profound was Vision talking to the White Vision. That little philosophical debate that was going on there that was like weirdly misplaced in the middle of that action. It was a great scene as like a little snapshot, a little snippet was so good. And I feel like that needed to be spaced out a little bit. Like if the episode was longer, you could have had these like slower moments in between the chaos that was going on inside the Hex and whatnot. And that was a great moment for all of that, because ultimately the White Vision storyline just kind of like comes and goes. There's no real point to it. And I think that prior to this episode, I really liked the fact that they were stripping Vision of his autonomy, of his final wish. Not only was Wanda doing that, but like and for her own personal reasons, and we can look at that as like it's a good thing. But like Hayward and Sword was doing that. They were turning him into a weapon, which was the exact opposite of what he wanted. There was no real conflict resolution to what happened there, other than Vision having a talk with himself and being like, you are more than what they made you. You are, you are you, so go live your own life. And so, yeah, he gets those memories back, but he's ultimately a new person, right? He's like now the combination of his creators and like the stuff that Vision told him, which is from the comics, when with the White Vision, he goes off and does his own thing separate from Wanda. And I think that eventually turns into him like creating his own family and whatnot, like we get in Tom King's Vision run. But it was just so brushed over that it left me a little unsatisfied for as great as that moment was. But yeah, I don't know how you felt specifically about that altercation, but
I thought it was a great moment in regards to something that we got from Vision in episode 7 when he's talking to Darcy, when she's filling him in on what Wanda has went through. And it's in that moment where she's giving him the recap. We realize that Vision has never had control over anything. The creation of Jarvis, the creation of Ultron, or Ultron created him to become the Vision, him having to pick sides in Civil War, him losing his life to, Thanos, not once but twice, and then him being brought back from the dead by Wanda in this Hex. So he's never had any say into what he wants to do in life, where he wants to go, what direction he wants to take, until he gets this Vision's quest at the end, or in that moment, in the library, which, knowledge is power and power is knowledge. They're in a library full of books as we see Vision kind of go out. So I actually enjoyed that because now Vision has a path that he can create his own journey. He can create his own story, which I like that. Of course, we're going to see him back again. I'm so happy. Well, two things. I'm glad they didn't kill Agatha Harkness because I think Kathryn Hahn is amazing. We'll talk about her later. But I'm so glad that Vision now has this kind of new perspective, a new version of Vision. This is the third iteration of Vision of sorts. So I'm excited to see Paul Bettany explore that aspect of the character. But like you said, as far as the execution, it being rushed, I felt that, and it's so weird to see an MCU show because we know we're going to see Vision again. We know we're going to see Wanda again. But if this was a regular, show that wasn't connected to the MCU, it would have felt like an empty kind of payoff. But again, knowing that we're going to probably see more Vision is probably something I'm looking forward to.
Right. I mean, he literally just like flies out of there, and then we don't like that's it. Right. And so, but there's other stuff like that. And I get it. Like, yes, there are threads that are going to be picked up and handled in like Multiverse of Madness and other like MCU projects down the road. But like, this is a series. This is a single story. You have to wrap up the important parts of this story. Yes, you can tee up the future, which they do in the post-credit sequences. But like the story you're telling has to have a beginning, middle, and end. It needs to be a cohesive entity. And I feel like in a lot of aspects, this did, but in like aspects like that they just sort of like brushed it under the table and we're just sort of like, okay, whatever. He just, up and leaves. And that's it. There's really no like conflict there. It was so, it felt so easily resolved. And, maybe that's just because it's like Vision talking to himself. And so like, I get it. But like, I don't know, everything in this really just comes down to the fact that everything was happening so fast in this episode. They were cramming so much into this episode, which we were afraid of because every other episode had been like 30 minutes prior to this. Then we get to the one like hour, not even hour long, 50-minute episode.
49 to be exact.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't, and it's just, you can see them like trying to cram everything in here to reach the finish line, and they don't service certain characters the way they do others. Yeah, obviously Wanda gets a nice payoff, Vision gets a nice payoff, but I think in hindsight I look back at this and I'm like, why do we have that episode where they recapped what had just happened for the past 3 episodes? That seemed like a waste of time. Why did we spend so much time with these side characters when they really didn't matter in the long run? What was the point of Darcy and Jimmy Woo other than just in throwing them in there for the hell of it? Even Monica Rambeau, who I loved throughout the entire series and I thought was going to play a bigger part in this, she had like only a handful of moments throughout the entire series where she was able to level and connect with Wanda on an emotional level because they had both lost someone. I wanted more of that. If you're going to include a character like that in there, don't just use her to set up Captain Marvel 2. Use her to actually like explore shared grief and whatnot. Like that was something that there were only like 2 lines, 2 little like, moments where the 2 of them connected on that. And it was so disappointing.
And that's a tough thing too, especially with, seeing that we're going to get a slate of TV shows from the MCU. Is when you get a character so pivotal to Marvel, which is Monica Rambeau, and you introduce the character, and then we go 4 or 5 episodes without reintroducing the character, and then which is going to be so interesting. The average viewer, when they see Captain Marvel 2, when they introduce they see Monica Rambeau for the first time, what's the context for that person watching that moment of like, who is this character? Where does she come from? I have to watch the show. It's going to be so interesting to see that. But in regards to just kind of feeling like the character was kind of left on empty, it sucks, man, because there's a lot to be diving into, as you just mentioned, that connection between her and Wanda losing her family, and they both come from the snap and they have no one to go to. Monica goes right back to work. Wanda, finds out what happens to Vision, takes his, we'll assume we thought she took his body, but they both have that in relation, but we don't get that moment. We don't get that that scene between 2 characters. It's only, like you said, mentioned once or twice throughout a couple various episodes, but we would never really hit that on the head on the hammer on the head there. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, Monica's story is followed up on in Captain Marvel 2. Hell, we might see her later this year in Miss Marvel. I doubt that would happen because I feel like that's a much different show compared to what WandaVision was. But I really do hope that a character like Monica Rambeau gets her due, because if I'm being honest, this almost feels like the comic book version of Captain Marvel, she was Captain Marvel first before Carol Danvers, and it seems like the live action is kind of mishandling that character, very reminiscent to the comic book run that she had. So Teyonah Parris is a great talent. I hope we get more of her story, and it's a little bit more fleshed out than what we got in this series.
Yeah, and like the one moment that she sort of had where she like comes into the final battle, which, by the way, this entire third act, that the action climax was like lifted from the end of The Incredibles, like straight up. It really was, even to the point with like Teyonah Parris coming in as like the Frozone character to sort of like save the kids, right? Like it was really, that was sort of weird to me, and it was like really abrupt as well. But I don't know. Again, it was like, it was nice to see the family fighting together and stuff like that. But like, yeah, even like her coming in, and like, it was just like, okay, so she's coming in, she's got power, she's gonna fuck up all these people. Vision's fighting, other Vision. Agatha's fighting Wanda. It was like everyone had like their own individual foil, and it was too much, if I'm being honest.
It's so funny because this show is so heavily reliant on Age of Ultron. And there's a lot of Age of Ultron in WandaVision, and I thought that this finale, felt like the finale of Age of Ultron. We're seeing a bunch of robots, we're seeing, Vision, Thor, Iron Man, all this. It just felt like, oh my gosh, can we just get back to the characters? It felt like that with this episode. It was very reminiscent to Age of Ultron finale to me, and I'm not a big fan of that finale.
No, I actually dislike that finale, and I dislike that film immensely. But what's really funny, speaking of Age of Ultron, my reaction to everything that was going on to this was, I think, like Rhodey, like in that show when he sees like Vision pop up out of nowhere and like all this shit is going on, he's just like, what? Like that was just sort of like me the entire time. It was just, they were just throwing stuff at the wall, and like, and I don't want to harp on the action because that is where a lot of my negativity lies, outside of the pacing. But like, my God, it was so bad. There was no like grapple on the geography of what was happening. We were just like jumping around, and like, and I know that Matt Shakman is capable of directing good action because he directed like some of the best episodes of Game of Thrones. So part of it to me feels like they had so much going on that they had to wrap up, that they weren't able to like do it in a concise way with the action and whatnot. Because it was like, okay, well, Vision has his foil, so we got to like service that arc, but we got to cut back to make sure that like Wanda's going over here, and like you can do that. You can cross cut between like 3 conflicts. We know like George Lucas does that really well. Christopher Nolan does that really well. But it's like in the case of this, they I don't know, they weren't able to pull it off, I guess.
Yeah, the execution was lacking. It was definitely poorly executed. On top of we're seeing, we got to talk boner talk, man. This is full boner talk now, man.
Yeah.
We see Monica Rambeau is being held in a man cave by Pietro, aka Ralph Boner. Now, again, we talked about it up top in regards to fan expectations, theories. He's an X-Men. You know, Magneto's gonna come in. Professor X is gonna save him. We're gonna get the Quicksilver moment we got in the X-Men films. That was a disappointment. And the only reason I say it's not because of the theories. My disappointment lies in why cast Evan Peters.
Yeah.
I understand it's fan service. It's cool. It's a little wink at the camera. But it's so unnecessary. It's so unnecessary for me. I love Evan Peters, don't get me wrong, but why? Why did we have to get that? And it was the punchline, again, going back to Age of Ultron. This felt like it was a punchline. It felt like just like Pietro was killed off just to have Wanda's narrative go forward, we have to have another Pietro to have a joke, a boner joke on a Disney Plus show. So... that moment was so terrible.
So that's definitely going to be a very polarizing moment. To probably everyone's surprise watching this, I actually really liked that. I thought it was very funny. I also here's the thing. I am also under the impression that this is not the last we're going to see of Evan Peters in this universe.
Really,
I really do think like they will come back and bring him in some capacity. You know, maybe like his time in the Hex or like his time with Agatha or whatever, ignited something and he could become like another version of Quicksilver, not necessarily her brother or whatnot. And like, boom, there we go. He can, he'll be back into the fold and everything. And if not, this is probably going to be another one of those things that's like akin to the Mandarin, where it's like you either are able to buy into that or you're not. And listen, as someone who hated that twist for the longest time, I get it.
You've come around to it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've come around to that, but like again, it took a little while. So I could see, I understand the frustration with this because of the fact that it was Evan Peters. Now listen, I wasn't expecting like Fox X-Men connections here.
Yeah.
Like I think that was like a little, too much there. But I was expecting like in some capacity that maybe I don't know, just like some slightly better resolution to the character. Like I mean, I get it. It wasn't Pietro, and like we knew that for like 2 episodes now. But I don't know. There was like I was still hoping for like maybe something a little more that they could do there.
I would have been okay with a couple of things. I would have been okay if it was revealed. She said this was Ralph the whole season, which plays into what you just said. I think it would be great the next time we see Kathryn Hahn. I mean, she might be with Ralph. She might be living with Ralph in his house. But I would have been okay if it was revealed that he was the bunny. He was, Senior Scratchy, and he's been there since day one. I would have been okay with him being the beekeeper, for God's sake. What happened to that character that just disappeared from the sewer? Like, where is he? I would have been okay with that. But instead, he's just a guy in his man cave with... I think a lot of people are theorizing that he is the protection program character, which who knows what kind of nonsense he got into to get into that situation.
Right.
I don't know. I just I'm not a fan of the Mandarin reveal, so that's why you'll never see me coming. So,
yeah. Well, I think where that differs is like the Mandarin reveal. Yeah, like Kingsley's like over the top, and he's like, it's like whoa, major subversion there. But I think the concept is interesting of what's scarier than like terrorism with a face, homegrown terrorism, like put on by your government and stuff. Like there's a lot of interesting sort of like social, not social, but just like a political commentary that you can kind of go into with the Mandarin twist. With this one, it just feels like very. Like they didn't know what to do with him, so they just wrote him out, And again, I liked the punchline of it. I thought it was really fun. The Ralph Boner thing that was funny, but still, like some sort of resolution there would have been nice. Maybe an acknowledgement that he was the guy in the witness protection program that Jimmy was after, because we have no idea who that is. That was another thing that was sort of like left up in the air.
Line, I guess.
Yeah, right. Like it was just a very strange sort of thing. Like Jimmy's character arc just kind of got cut off Darcy, again, why was she there? I was on board with her for a little bit, and then I was just like,
the build up for Dottie. Everyone thought Dottie was an important character, but she's just like everyone else in the Hex. She just wants to see her daughter again.
Was it her daughter? I might have misheard that, because part of me was thinking, oh, maybe her kids were Billy and Tommy, and then Wanda took those kids from her.
No, I think the line was, I just want to see my daughter, and hey, your kids can be my friends. They can be friends together if that plays into your storyline. Okay, so she was just someone that was trapped under the Hex of Wanda.
Yeah, for sure. Which that was a great moment, by the way, where it's like sort of all of the people that she had wronged, like all the people that were being held hostages and victims in Westview were just like, I mean, it did paint Wanda in that sort of like anti-hero light, which was great. I mean, the thing that the show did so well was make Wanda such a well-rounded and flawed character, but a flawed character who's like, you understand her reasoning, you empathize with her, and ultimately, I mean, the show is about her overcoming her grief, and I think she was able to do that. She embraces her new identity as the Scarlet Witch, which is great. When we get that costume reveal, I mean, that's something that fans have been wanting to see from the moment she was introduced into the Avengers, and like, it didn't disappoint. It was a really sleek way of adapting like kind of a silly costume in the comics to just looking like that. And like, obviously we get the reveal that she's more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange. And so there's, I think, while I had like all these issues that we're sort of talking about, what it did really well is it cemented Elizabeth Olsen and Wanda Maximoff as like the future of the MCU. She is going to be like one of the biggest components to this universe going forward.
In a show like this makes us, again, because Wanda, I was a fan of Elizabeth Olsen in the role. I was a fan of Wanda, but she wasn't like top tier MCU characters for me until we got this show. So like you said, I'm so excited to see her journey continue on, whether it be, we see her later this December in Spider-Man No Way Home, and of course her continuation in Doctor Strange 2. But I gotta applaud the performances. I don't want to forget that regarding Elizabeth Olsen, Paul Bettany, all those emotional moments. I think last week, Concrete can say that that's my favorite episode just because of the tour de France of the performance she gave us. But yeah, man, the stuff that we got with Wanda, that costume was like Ruth E. Carter like costume design. I was so happy with that costume. The birth of the Scarlet Witch, I thought that was handled pretty well in regards to that MCU reimagining the character and kind of introducing us to this most powerful being, Nexus being, if you want to call her that, in the MCU. And as you just mentioned, her being more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme, which my question for you, Griffin, is were you a little let down that we didn't get to see Stephen Strange make an appearance? No. I have my thoughts on what he's been up to, but I'm just kind of curious if that was someone you were maybe looking to see in this episode.
Yeah, again, going back to the fact that like all the theories are sort of thrown out the window, like that's okay. I'm okay with that. I don't need that. I almost feel like the arrival of a Stephen Strange would have undercut a lot of the stuff that was going on with Wanda and Vision and whatnot. It would have just been like, oh, here's the big, face, the big cameo, and we don't always need a big cameo. So I was really happy that they exercised restraint there, because it would have been too easy to just have him sort of like come in and like clean everything up or whatever, have some sort of like exchange with Wanda, and we didn't need that. And even when the series began and everyone was sort of like saying, oh, Doctor Strange is going to be in this because Wanda's in the Multiverse of Madness, I was always like, I could see it if he is, but also I don't want to see this. Like, I don't want to see him in there. This is Wanda's story. Don't take it away from her. And I was really happy that they did that. So, I mean, again, I'll just reiterate this again. My reasoning for not liking this episode has nothing to do with getting caught up in theories or stuff like that. I don't give a shit about Mephisto, Nightmare, or like Doctor Strange and the X-Men popping in here. I think it's really foolish to believe that.
All that stuff.
It's foolish to think that all that stuff was going to pop up in here. That's just that's blowing things way out of proportion. My issues with this episode deal with narrative storytelling and the fact that they left everything up to a 50-minute episode. To just wrap up an entire series with so many loose ends, so many plot threads, and ultimately they serviced Wanda, they serviced Vision as they should have, but then there were a lot of side characters that they'd spent time with that just kind of got cut. Yeah, and that's ultimately where it comes down to, along with like the action just being a disaster.
Yeah, and going back to that Doctor Strange, I'm totally in the same boat with you. I will say, though, if it would have come up, it would have made narrative sense in the MCU, not necessarily WandaVision, but in the MCU. We know that Doctor Strange, as he tells, Tony Stark in Infinity War, he protects reality, and we know that Wanda's manipulating reality right now, not on a much grander scale that I was anticipating with the Hex going out and maybe expanding to New Jersey in its entirety, but yeah, I think Doctor Strange is a busy man. He's been gone for 5 years. There's no Infinity Stones. There's no Time Stone. Dormammu might be loose. So I think he's been kind of busy handling some stuff on his own. But yeah, I wasn't too surprised that we didn't see Mr. Benedict make a cameo. And I totally agree with you. I think it would have undercut some of the main storyline and just even been more confusing and even more rushed if he just came out of left field.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the antagonists here, because we've sort of touched on them a little bit, but let's dedicate some time to them. Agatha Harkness and director Hayward. Loved what Kathryn Hahn did with the character of Agatha Harkness. The battle between her and Wanda was fine. It was a little uninspired, but I mean, ultimately, it just came down to the fact that I'm happy that they kept her around. But there was that great moment though where Wanda tried to get into her head, and then like all the witches sort of like turned on her, and I was like, oh, that's creative right there. Like I kind of like what you're going for with that. But Elliott, what did you sort of think of the resolution for Agatha and all that stuff?
So I'm so glad Kathryn Hahn wasn't killed off, because I think there's so much more to explore with that character. As we, again, kind of alluded to when we knew that Agnes, the nosy neighbor, was going to come out to be Agatha Harkness. And if there were some story beats taken from the comics, that she was going to eventually maybe be a mentor of sorts. So I love that they kept her. And as Wanda says in this episode, I know where you'll be, if she ever needs to know how to use her power. So I love that she's still alive. And I just love, too, just the mirror of the characters in this show and this narrative that they're telling. When we got the Agatha Harkness origins, she screamed for help. I don't know how to use these dark magics. As she's absorbing her coven, we know that kind of, ties into her ultimate goal with Wanda, but I just love how that parallels to Wanda. She wasn't able to have someone train her how to use her abilities, not even knowing that she was a Scarlet Witch. So I love that parallel there. But in regards to Agatha, again, I thought that the entire play on just how she can be funny, she could be witty, she could be menacing, she could be a great MCU villain. And I'm really excited to see more of that character, Agatha Harkness. And I thought that Kathryn Hahn, man, she just really did a great job. And I'm really excited to see where we see her at if she does return in the MCU within the next coming years.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the interesting things about it was like her basically like going to Wanda and saying like, I had to work hard, I had to learn all of this stuff in order to like become the witch or whatever, to become like as powerful as I am. And we see Wanda start to realize that like her power is a little she can't really control it as well as she could had she learned training. Hence why we when we get to the ending and we see her going through the what's the name of the book again? I'm forgetting the name of it. The Darkhold.
The Darkhold.
And stuff like that. We see that she is like learning to master her powers and dark magic and probably bring back her kids or whatever, because we hear that echo of the voice in that post credit scene. But yeah, but that is the thing. It's like they do. There are similarities between the two of them, which I think was nicely highlighted in this episode. And like Agatha was an antagonist, but she wasn't. I wouldn't say that she was a villain. Like she wanted to suck Wanda's power from her and like become the all maniacal witch and everything. But there was, I don't know. She didn't feel as menacing as like other villains, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I think that was just sort of like by design of the character. The character kind of like in the comics goes from being somewhat of an antagonist, somewhat of an ally, and she kind of operates in a gray area, similar to Wanda, who is like we were talking about. She is like that true anti-hero where it's like she does save people, but she also kind of has like this darkness inside her that she's obviously indulged a little bit more. So the similarities between the two, I think, are what's ultimately going to like lead to future team ups and being like allies and whatnot. It's what it's kind of it reminds me of Thor and Loki. I mean, Loki was obviously a villain in the first Avengers film, but like given all the stuff that sort of happened and like how the relationship has progressed, he is a little bit more of an anti-hero. So I don't know. That's sort of where I kind of like that they went that direction with her.
And it's interesting, too, going back to what you're saying about anti-hero, not a straight-up villain. Again, just knowing that we ultimately don't know what she was going to do with the Scarlet Witch powers. She just told her, you don't deserve the power. You don't know how to use it. We don't necessarily, we don't know if she was going to take over the world, take out all the witches or whatever the case may be. She really just maybe wanted to harness her power to control the power. Maybe she was going to put it in, some type of capsule and close it off so no one can ever, have that type of power again. So it'll be really interesting to see what lies between Agatha in the future. But again, just going back to the performance of Kathryn Hahn, man, I thought that she just really knocked it out of the park, and I'm really, really excited to see where we see her at in a future MCU project.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be fun to just see her pop up here and there and whatnot. But as for Hayward, I mean, I guess we should have expected that he wasn't really going to be that big of a player, but I think after last week when we were introduced to the fact that he was like bringing in the evil vision and stuff like that, they were like, okay, well, he served his purpose, doesn't really matter anymore. And I get it, but it was also so just like anticlimactic. It was just like, okay, you kind of built this guy up as a pretty, he was like a formidable adversary and whatnot. And he was going to use, what Wanda held most dear to her against her. And I think that and obviously the stuff with Vision going on, him creating like the white Vision to go up against Vision as well. I don't know, there was just like there was a lot of opportunity there, and they didn't really do it as well as I thought they were going to. There was so much potential with Hayward.
Of course, he's not going to be an Avenger level threat or whatever the case may be. Right. And who knows, we might see him again in the future because he's just arrested, which was so, like you said, anticlimactic.
It was just like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, Darcy rans him into a car. And number one, what has she been doing? She's been driving around
it was
Westview for the last 24 hours. But, man, the thing that I'll say this about Hayward. In a really, really poor way, he reminds me of a poor man's Baron Zemo, because there is a little bit to be said about he always referred to Wanda as a threat, as a terrorist, as a villain. And in a way, she kind of is viewed that way, especially if you ask the people at Westview. And they hate Wanda. And I think that's a seed or a plant of a seed that we might see a Hayward in the future, whether it be Thunderbolts and he's teaming up with Baron Zemo and other villains in the MCU, because this conversation is still to be said from Civil War. We got to remember Wanda's still a fugitive. The Sokovia Accords are still in play, so she is technically not only looked upon negatively at Westview, but the world looks at her negatively because she's not a part of the Sokovia Accords. So I think, again, a very poor man's attempt of Baron Zemo's mission, but as he said many times ago, that he viewed her as a threat, and I think that's something that might set up, 10 years from now, Civil War II, where humanity is going to look at the Avengers or whoever's left of the Avengers as a potential threat, because we're seeing this Scarlet Witch, what she can do. She literally took hostage a whole town of almost 3,000 people just because she was dealing with grief. So I think there is something to be said about that character, maybe not the character and the acting and all that stuff, but just what that represents of society looking at the Avengers and what they can potentially do if they're upset, if they're out of control, which, again, with General Ross and now with Hayward, I think that's a continuing threat line that we're going to see. Falcon and Winter Soldier, so on and so forth. So I think that's the one thing I'll take from Hayward is what the character represents.
Yeah, I think that's a nice silver lining for an otherwise kind of like poorly written character. It is the ideology of what he represents. I wish they would have gotten into that a little bit more, but what? Perhaps it wasn't the right show to do so. I suspect that that'll probably be more of something to explore in Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
So that's fair. That's fair. The character, as for just like him as a character, it was weak, and it just felt like they just used him for
he did
plot
they
purposes.
played the traditional villain. He literally did every single thing that every 80s 90s action movie villain does, where when Wu comes in, he tells him his whole plan. Why do you have to tell Wu what's your plan? It's like, come on, man, you guys didn't have to make him just that tropey and that generic.
yeah that was a bit of a bummer, but listen, like, if I could have dealt with that. I would have been okay with that if like some of the other stuff was like a little bit better. But like with that, it's just sort of like you're tacking on a bunch of stuff. And like, listen, I know it really sounds like we're dogging on this finale. I don't think it's the worst episode of the series. I do think that the Malcolm in the Middle one, I think was probably
the Halloween episode.
Yeah, that might have been the worst one. Or the recap episode, now in hindsight, I think probably isn't as necessary as we thought it was. This one, it was fine. It just didn't do everything that, as a finale, it needed to do. And a lot of times with these shows that are like super popular and that people are really passionate about, that is the case. And like, look, you're never going to please everyone, but I think there are some things that they could have done writing wise that would have serviced characters a little bit more. Listen, the thing that I will say is this doesn't detract from the rest of the series. And I want to make that very clear because I think the great thing about this show is that what it did for Wanda and Vision as characters is it brought them to like A-list level MCU characters. They were like, 100%. B- borderline C-list characters because they really hadn't gotten a lot. And then we finally get this series and it explores so much of who they are and the pain they've gone through and the lessons they've had to learn. And it was beautiful. And like, yeah, there's a lot of really solid emotional moments in this finale and throughout the entire series. So like, I want to just like make that very clear. I still think that WandaVision as a whole, while the ending it kind of went out on a whimper, I do think the entirety of the show is excellent, top tier MCU for sure. At least for me, I don't know how you feel, but
no, I'm right there with you, man. I'm not one of those. I learned my lesson with many years ago with Game of Thrones, and that's something that's a finale, right? We're never going to see Jon Snow and Daenerys. We're not going to see those characters, and I felt like the way those were handled, it's frustrating because we're never going to get those wrongs corrected. We're opposed to WandaVision, man. We still have these characters. Wanda's still out there as a Scarlet Witch looking for her children, which we'll talk about the post-credit scenes. And, we still have Vision on his quest to figuring out who he is finally without having any restraints. So there is that's to look forward to and to see more of those characters get a little bit more of their story fleshed out. I think they've even said last week that, and you even mentioned it, Wanda Maximoff will be a very pivotal player in Phase 4 in the future of the MCU, so that's exciting to hear. But in regards to just narratively speaking, this is some of the best, if not the best, character-focused story that we've gotten in the MCU. There's only so much you can do in a 2-hour movie, 2.5-hour movie, or even in an Endgame, but that wasn't necessarily, studying all the characters. We already kind of knew those characters for spending 10 years with them. So this, being able to see, I know a lot of people complained about last week's episode, which to me is my favorite. Because we heard what Wanda went through as a child. We heard and all that stuff. But seeing that it's a double entendre for me because we saw it. We hear about it, but it was also, as Agatha says to Wanda in an episode, this is for you to see, Wanda. This is your rerun. So she has to finally face what she's been hiding, what she's been running from her entire life, which is the grief. And we see that play into fruition in this episode where she has to tell her boys, her husband, goodbye. I can't have the perfect life. I can't bring you guys back. I have to deal with this and learn from it, become better from it, and who knows what the future holds for the character. So overall, man, it's still, like I said, one of the best pieces of MCU character-focused, character-driven story that we've gotten in the MCU, and I'm just so excited to learn more about individual characters, She-Hulk, Kate Bishop, Kamala Khan, all those different announcements that we got. We got Loki even so much, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Sam and Bucky. We're going to meet these characters. We're going to learn who these characters are. And when we see them fighting against Galactus in Avengers 5, we care so much more for them, right? When they get their whole life destroyed.
I think I'm glad you brought up last week because like last week to me was that was like the thematic resolution to this story. I guess it was part one of that because part two was sort of like her actually like going through and like delivering on the promise of like confronting grief and you know, moving forward from it. But like last week was just like so strong in that regard. I really wish that they wouldn't have gone action heavy. I know it wouldn't have satisfied a lot of MCU fans, and I think a lot of like casuals would not have appreciated it. But like, I feel like they could have just gone really compelling, really character focused. You could have had like a small little altercation with Agatha Harkness or whatever, but like keep it, you know, focused on the grief and the trauma and like the philosophical debate that's sort of like going on between Vision and whatever. And they tried to do that. To give them credit, they did try to do that, but the noise of the action just kind of like it overpowered it a little bit. I wish they would have dialed that back significantly to focus 100%. Just 100% on the characters, because that's where this story was at its best. And honestly, you know, having seen, you know, the larger MCU sort of like crashing down on the story, I missed going back to those earlier episodes where it was like this sitcom format where there was like something weird, otherworldly, going on. It was just so much more creative and original. And then we get to this climax, and it's just sort of like it weirdly didn't mesh for me. But you know, listen, that's I'm sure other people will feel differently, and that's the great thing about this show is and entertainment in general. You can feel one way, I can feel another way. But you did bring up the post-credit scene, and let's touch on that before we start to wrap things up here. What'd you think of them?
The first one was as Monica Rambeau again. It was just kind of again poorly executed. We're gonna set this up again. Very similar to Age of Ultron, the Thor bath scene, all that stuff that they set up with his dreams. It felt like that with Monica in this episode. You know, she's gonna be in Captain Marvel too. Literally the execution of the idea. You know, going to theater, there's a random scroll. I thought that it could have had a little bit more gravitas or a little bit more satisfaction or a crowd-pleasing moment if it was, you know, Thanos. If it was her best friend that she met in Captain Marvel, that she met on, you know, on the stairs.
Yeah, that was
random scroll.
Yeah, who is it? Like, because I saw someone in the chat say, "Is that Talos' daughter?" And I was like, I don't fucking know who this is. Like,
she didn't know her. No, she didn't know her. Yeah, because she would have been like, "Hey, you know," she would have said her name or hugged her or something. It was a random scroll. And then she points towards the sky. Again, we're assuming that she's saying that he wants to meet you. I assume that's Nick Fury. You know, a la last time we saw him was in Far From Home with, you know, resting, taking a vacation. So that post-credit scene to me was very, and then we see, you know, Hayward getting arrested. Again, Darcy she's Batman. She just disappears. She doesn't have to do a debriefing. Batman. She just goes off. Yeah, she goes off and does her own mission, you know, or living her life in Westview. But that first one was just, again, just kind of teeing up the Captain Marvel stuff, which just felt poor. The second one, on the other hand, was pretty awesome. I enjoyed it. First off, it felt so cinematic. Just the sweeping shots. That
really did, right?
Yeah. I'm like, is this okay? Is this the opening to Doctor Strange 2 or something? Like, that would be interesting.
So yeah, that was really. I'm glad you brought up like how cinematic that felt, because it was like in total contrast to everything else from the previous episode, which, like, we have been praising this show for being cinematic, and largely it was incredibly cinematic. This episode felt like a really bad episode of like CW, like superhero throwdowns. Again, don't know what that was all about, but this episode felt very TV, while the rest of it felt very, you know, film level quality, what we're used to seeing from Marvel. So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Yeah, again, it would be interesting if that is like, if we literally see, because again, we know that this does set up, you know, Doctor Strange 2. If we see that scene in Doctor Strange 2, again, because there's some people, believe it or not, you know, not everyone's tied into this universe like we are. There's people that haven't watched WandaVision, so that would be a great kind of intro to that movie. Seeing that she's by herself, she's alone, and if you see her from Endgame, you're just assuming, okay, she went from the funeral and now this is her life. So that's narratively really speaking, it could make sense if they do that. And it looked, like you said, it looks like a movie scene. But seeing her coming in, and again, she's more powerful than Sorcerer Supreme. She has, autopilot powers where she can have her body making tea, doing daily things, and we see that she's studying the dark hold, and we get the cry of her kids, Billy and Tommy, which I hate to say the M word, but it's looking like, Mephisto. Mephisto might have them captive in some way, or, a nightmare, or Dormammu. Again, I'm still to believe that Doctor Strange has to deal with them because the time loop is over. There's no time stone to control this dark entity. So, into the multiverse, she calls up Doctor Strange. My kids are out there some way, somehow. They're in some other dimension. They're in some other universe. They're maybe in another world where there's a Peter Parker that might tag along on that trip with them. So I like that one, what it sets up. And visually, too, it was really cool to see her just, again, reading the book and doing the next level of what we've seen Strange do in the past.
Yeah, I was about to say, when we see Strange do that stuff, it's like his body is like sleeping, right? Like he can't like walk around and like function as a person. Exactly. She's like walking around doing
powerful, man.
Whatever, in her cabin while doing all that, and just again sort of like doubling down on the fact that like yes, she is the most powerful Avenger in this universe. So there's that there. But I did, that was a really good point that you brought up about the fact that it's like if you don't watch WandaVision, you can still go into Doctor Strange and like be able to get it because this event, like the events of WandaVision were so like insular and like it furthered the character, and it would behoove you to go and watch WandaVision if you haven't. Right. But if it picked up with her in this cabin, like you were saying, I think it would make sense and you'd be able to go through with the story. So that is sort of like an interesting way of furthering characters, but also like, sticking to the main story in the films and whatnot. I don't know. That's just an interesting thing to consider, I think.
And I mean, hell, if they do play on that scene, a Baron Mordo comes in and says, "Hey, have you read that chapter there?" Or even a Doctor Strange comes in and explains a certain chapter or something. That would be really cool if they do pick that through line up, that particular scene, because it has some significance. And again, Billy and Tommy, where are they? What dimension? Who's holding them captive? Where are they screaming from? It's exciting stuff. It's exciting stuff for the future.
Yeah, I think that'll definitely. I mean, listen, I'm not. I'm going to put Mephisto to bed right now. I'm never going to say the name of Mephisto ever again.
The devils are in the details.
Listen, if he's going to, again, I'm going to stop theorizing about these shows, even though it doesn't. Again, it didn't affect my enjoyment of this episode.
Yeah, but, it's all fun and games. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, maybe they find a way to bring him in, and then we do get this sort of. Dante's Inferno sort of thing, which is what I want. I want a Dante's Inferno kind of story where they have to go down, battle their way through hell, rescue
Raimi,
something.
Are you kidding me?
It's
going to be so awesome.
It's so up his alley too. So like, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, when they were like slowly turning the corner and we see Wanda doing the her strange thing with the Darkhold and whatever, I thought for a second that maybe we were going to see Baron Mordo break in and that was going to be the catalyst for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Right.
It just, I don't know, that'd be interesting. And I do wonder if that is what's going to sort of happen there and how that whole thing is going to get kicked off by him coming in trying to kill Wanda and whatnot. So, there's a lot to sort of think about in regards to the future for sure. I don't know. Do you think Baron Mordo is going to be the main villain of Doctor Strange 2, or are they going to kind of have him as this like side antagonist?
I hope so. I really hope so, man, because Chiwetel Ejiofor, Oscar, winning type of actor, man, he definitely deserves more. Because, and honestly, I don't really revisit Doctor Strange too often, just because it isn't one of my favorite Marvels. It's kind of in the middle of the pack for me personally. Visually incredible, but it's a little lacking in the story department. But yeah, man, I think that there's an opportunity there for a Baron Mordo to be not a big threat, but the catalyst, as you mentioned Loki earlier, again, a Loki-ish type of player who kind of sets the stage, puts the pieces to the puzzle behind the scenes. Again, it's very key that, Agatha said in this episode, you are the Scarlet Witch. You are destined to destroy the world. we know that Baron Mordo, his whole thing is no more sorcerers, no more, witches of that sort. We didn't have witches back then, but now we have him. So
yeah,
I would really like them to really use him to either him bringing in a B character, whether it is talking to a dark dimension and making a deal with the devil, or again, I'm still holding my hat on Dormammu, man. He's been released from this time loop because there's no time stone in the MCU anymore. So I think that he's someone to keep an eye out for. There's Doctor Voodoo. True. There's a lot of Doctor Strange has an incredible not Spider-Man level of rogues gallery, but he has some really good villains to look into, and I really hope that they allow Chiwetel Ejiofor to show off those acting chops, because I don't know, sometimes movies like, we get with Old Guard and, Lockdown, I don't know what his PR, his agent has him in these silly movies. He's an incredible actor, man.
Yeah, he's too good for that, for sure. And actually I just remembered that he was in Love Actually, so there's that too.
There you go.
No, but I'm glad you brought that up, because while I was not the biggest fan of Doctor Strange, the one thing that I said coming out of that movie and I've kind of stuck with is that, like, they have set up Baron Mordo to be like one of the great MCU villains, and I really hope that they give him his due. So I, whether or not he'll be the foil for that film, we'll see. But I think I'm hoping that he gets his moment and that he will be that big, adversary to Strange. That we're sort of hoping there. But before we wrap this up, though, I do want to get to there were a few questions in here that I wanted to answer, mainly from Ronald E. Smith, which if you don't listen to his podcast, go listen to it, because dude is freaking incredible. Great interviewer. He says something interesting here. He says, did you both really believe the relationship between Wanda and Vision? Some people feel that their relationship felt either rushed or unearned. Elliott, I'll let you take this one first.
Yeah. From before we got this show, I'm right. To Ron's point, I didn't feel like it was earned. I feel like it was rushed. I feel like it was a setup again for Major Ultron. They literally spend 2 seconds together. We see a little bit of the, we see that scene in fruition in episode 8 where her and Vision make that connection at the Avengers compound. Having kind of that moment of Wanda having someone to lean on, and Vision having someone to learn about grief, to learn about love with. So I love that we see that in episode 8, which again is the best episode of the show. But even in that film, we really don't see the love come from those characters. And then we go over to Infinity War, and we literally spend just 2 minutes with them on the run, and Scotland and whatever. And we don't. I never felt that it was love. It was just kind of forced love. I never felt like it was something that was earned until we got this series, until we see what Vision meant to Wanda and vice versa, with Vision, being able to learn from someone that's coming from so much grief and be able to find love within someone that's kind of broken in a certain sense. So I now have a much more appreciation for that love, and I feel like it's earned now. And who knows what the future holds for this new Vision out there and Wanda. I don't know if they'll retread that relationship or if it is something that we won't see again. Who knows what the future holds, but seeing them in the MCU, I wasn't a fan, but now seeing this show, I come to appreciate them. It's still Cap and Peggy. They're still number one for me. Yeah. But Wanda and Vision are definitely probably in that top tier, Tony Stark, Pepper Potts type of territory. And you have Jane Foster and Thor all the way at the bottom.
Yeah. I definitely did buy into their relationship, and I understand the critiques of it. Prior to WandaVision and stuff like that, they never were really given the time together, the moments to shine, and stuff like that. But I think the moments they did get were really intimate, were really personal, and you could see them kind of gravitating towards one another. And then you have an episode like episode 8 of WandaVision that really comes back and it recontextualizes those moments, and we see how they just grew closer and closer together. And it's absolutely beautiful. So it was like sort of the thing that I liked about last week is it was going backwards in order to go forwards, and sort of like just shed more light on the stuff that had happened prior to that. So I believed it, and maybe a lot of it has to do with just Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, their chemistry, and the way they're able to work off of one another. But I mean, WandaVision, it made them probably my favorite couple in the MCU. I mean, like Cap and Peggy is really hard to top, and I think that one was just so pure and sincere. And that last dance is, oh my God, yeah, it's incredible. And especially the scene where like she's older and like he hasn't aged, and like that's really heartbreaking stuff. But all the time that we got with Wanda and Vision in this series definitely like boosted them to the top, and I did believe it. It felt it was tragic when she had to say goodbye for like the ntth time. Well, they didn't even say goodbye. Dude. You know,
I was
like
gonna say that scene, man. Again, talk about emotional payoff. I don't have the line in front of me, but it was something in regards to when Vision asks her, "What am I? You know, where do I come from? You know, you were my pain, you were my sadness, you were my loneliness, but you were also my love and my hope." Come on, Griff. And the tear comes down. That's like so some. Good. Again, it can be overshadowed because of the disappointment of the action and feeling like it's a lot of, like you said, a lot of noise, but it's something I won't forget, you know. I can take that scene and put it in that my memory bank as one of the top lines and one of the most genuinely earned moments based off of those, 9 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's the thing, and I said this last week, but like WandaVision has some of the best moments in the entire MCU. Like a lot of the stuff from last week for sure. I mean, the moment in the Avengers compound, absolutely. The moment where she creates the reality, the Hex. I mean, like even some of the other moments earlier on in this series for sure. And the argument between her and Vision was also really emotional. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Question for you, kind of going off of Ron's question. Speaking of feeling earned. How do you feel about the boys, the twins? Do you feel like that was an earned emotion? Do you feel like that going on these kids, finding her kids, as we say, do you feel like that was earned in this show? I honestly, if I'm being honest, I don't know if I feel it, man.
I'm a little conflicted. I felt it when I saw them start to disintegrate. When I saw them start to disintegrate and Vision start to disintegrate, and then I saw like Wanda's reaction. Like you could feel in that moment what they meant to her. But yeah, and I don't know if they necessarily. I think they did a good job with them. I think like it's something where they'll get furthered along as the show, as you know, the MCU kind of continues, because I don't think that's the last we've seen of Wiccan and Speed. Perhaps the next time we see them they'll be much older or whatever. But if we're gonna look to see what happens in the comics and everything like that, they do find a way back. So. Yeah, I don't know. It was fine. I mean, obviously room for improvement, but when their lives were at stake and when she had to say goodbye to her family, her new family that she had worked so hard to like keep and preserve and fight for. Right. I did feel myself getting kind of emotional. So I would say, yeah, I guess they did. Their development and like their attachment to Wanda did sort of work for me. But all right, guys, before we start wrapping this up, be sure again to jump down in the comment section and let us know what you thought of the finale, what you thought of the whole series, where you think things are going in the future for Scarlet Witch and Vision and all that good stuff. Let's have a great conversation down there as well. And thank you for those of you who have put in some great comments in the chat. I have been reading them and trying to incorporate them into the conversation. So great stuff. Thank you so much for watching this live. And then also be sure to give this video a like, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more MCU talk. I mean, Falcon and Winter Soldier is right around the corner, so you're going to want to stay up to date on all that stuff, which Elliott will be back for, talking more MCU stuff. But before we look to the future, let's say goodbye to WandaVision. Elliott, final thoughts on the series and the finale.
Yeah, man, this is, we got to remember, this is the first MCU live action show in 2008. Iron Man kicked off the MCU cinematically in the movies, and, you fast forward to 2021. Now that mantle's been passed on to Wanda. So I'm really excited for the future of the MCU based on this series. We talked about the originality. We can't forget the first 3 episodes, a sitcom series. As the episodes go on, more about the grief, more about the character, understanding what she's going through, facing her trauma. All that stuff will never be lost or forgotten about, even with some of the shortcomings and some of the secondary characters not coming to fruition. This is great, man. I'm so excited. This is a template for what we're getting in Phase 4, which, again, what do you do after Thanos? What do you do after the Infinity Stones, after the Infinity Saga? You go back to the ground level. You go back to what makes these superheroes. They're flawed. They're heroic. They make good decisions. They make bad decisions. Their views are skewed sometimes, but that's what makes us human. Where no one's perfect, and I think this show shows that. I think this character Wanda is a great, representing what a flawed character can look like, but can overcome a fate of being a world destroyer of sorts, being quoted as the Scarlet Witch. So this is something that I'll hold near and dear, man. The watchability will be really interesting to have all 9 episodes available to us now, and watching episode 1 all the way to 9, and maybe growing even a fonder appreciation for this show. But one thing that I will not forget about this show is the incredible performance by Elizabeth Olsen, Paul Bettany, the originality, the story that was told, the human story that we can all relate to in regards to grief. And you throw in some good moments like Ralph Boner, and you get an Agatha all along. You get some really fun moments for the crowds to enjoy. You get the Pietro, coming in episode 5, the jaw-dropping moment there, and so much fun with the theories, so much fun with the conversation, and that's what the MCU is about. It gets people excited, whether it's something that turns out to be a 10 or something that turns out to be just kind of in the middle of the road. It's something that the MCU has done a great job at doing in the last 13 years. It keeps the conversation going. It pushes the genre forward, especially when you have genres within genres, a mind-bending type of show. We get an action show next week or next 2 weeks from now, and dealing with racism and dealing with different political things in the MCU. We have a coming-of-age story with Ms. Marvel. We have a time travel show with Loki. So MCU Phase 4, WandaVision's in the books, and I can't wait to see what they have up their sleeve next, man.
Yeah, right. Very well put. I think the thing that I'm going to remember most about the show, and the thing that I love most about it, is the character drama, how they furthered 2 of the Avengers that really didn't have as much screen time and have been around since 2015 with Age of Ultron. If you're Paul Bettany, you've been around even longer than that because he was the voice of Jarvis. And so finally getting to see these 2 veterans of the MCU get their due was beautiful. And it did sort of serve as this origin for Scarlet Witch in a way. And I loved that so much. Again, yeah, like you said, Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, excellent performances. You could see them just really enjoying the creative freedom that they had and like being able to push these characters to new heights. Elizabeth Olsen especially just floored me week to week in this show. Just like even in some of the weaker episodes, she had like excellent, emotive moments, powerful moments. And like we were talking about earlier, I think WandaVision has some of my favorite MCU moments to date. And they're the small, intimate character stuff. And that's what I'm going to remember most about the show is like how it, focused on character for a large portion of it. I mean, basically all the way up until the finale. It was a very it was a character drama with some interesting, quirky things going on, and the way it sort of like did the homages to the sitcoms was brilliant. Yeah. I mean, it skyrocketed Scarlet Witch and Vision, especially Scarlet Witch, to being 2 of my favorite characters in the Avengers. So I loved it, and I loved the discourse. It was just like so much fun to discuss about and like theorize about, and like even if the theories didn't come true, it was so fun to just sort of like speculate about the possibilities. And I'm with you. I think if this is any indication as to the direction of where Phase 4 is going, the amount of time that we're going to get to spend with these characters and exploring interesting topical issues or just like empathetic themes and stuff like that, I think this is a really I love this direction. It's great. Yeah. And so, while the finale wasn't the greatest, I do think the rest of the show is pretty damn perfect, if I do say so. So there you have it. That's those are our thoughts on WandaVision, and we have finally reached the end of the series. So thank you to all of you who joined us each and every week, whether it was live or whether it was on the replay. We really appreciated it, and we really appreciated the conversations that you guys have sparked in the comment section, in the live chat, and all that good stuff. And we're just getting started with Phase 4 of the MCU and these TV shows. So stick around because we will be back for Falcon and the Winter Soldier in 2 weeks. That'll be a lot of fun to discuss and speculate about on a weekly basis. And of course, Elliott will be back for that as well. And speaking of Elliott, go subscribe to his YouTube channel. And Elliott, where can everyone find your channel?
Yeah, man. Hey, Griff, first and foremost, man, from, Lovecraft Country, The Mandalorian to this, and obviously, more collabs in the future, my friend. I really appreciate you allowing me to come on your platform and have some great discourse about MCU, sci-fi, horror, all that fun stuff. And yeah, man, when we get to Falcon and Winter Soldier, I can't wait to see Mephisto's cameo in that show and Nightmare and all that stuff. It's going to be so fun, man. But yeah, man, you guys can find me here on YouTube at Movie Files talking about shows like WandaVision, other movies and things that we have out there to talk about. So definitely check me out there. And of course, on other social media platforms like Instagram at Movie Files, on Twitter at Movie Files Live. And I joined TikTok about a week ago. You can find me on TikTok at Movie Files. So yeah.
Yeah, you hear that, Gen Zers? This millennial over here has joined TikTok, so
I did it.
Go check out his TikToks and all that stuff. But yeah, guys, you can always like FilmSpeak on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, just search FilmSpeak. And lastly, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, thank you all so much for joining in on the conversation of WandaVision, and we will catch you back here in 2 weeks for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Until then, take care.